In October of 2024, staff at the Bristol Zoo project were going through footage from their night vision camera traps when they found something really strange. In the middle of Bear Wood, a 7.5-acre enclosure where bears, wolves, wolverines, and lynxes roam, the cameras picked up a strange four-legged creature. It had what looked like wings and horns. Obviously, none of the zoo's animals matched it. And for weeks, people had been saying something strange was moving between the trees. Even the animals seemed spooked. Wolves and wolverines don't usually pay much attention to the usual wildlife like deer, but this time they did. They seemed spooked by something. Well, they still have no idea what this creature was. Some people think it's just a deer caught in like a weird angle, maybe with motion blur making the ears look kind of like wings, but others think maybe Bristol now has its own local legend. Well, it's not often we get news about Nessie, but here we are. Just back in January, something strange showed up on one of the live webcams overlooking Loch Ness. A regular visitor named Andy caught it moving near the shore, heading towards Sherry Island, then turning around and slipping back out into deeper water before vanishing. He said it was cruising along for a few minutes between 4:41 and 4:48 in the afternoon. Andy's been coming to Loch Ness since the late 80s. He's familiar with the environment and normal wildlife around the loch, but this was something else. The group that runs the webcam, Loch Ness Exploration, said the footage was worth sharing because it wasn't just another random wave or boat ripple. Whatever the thing was, it looked pretty big, and this isn't the first time. In August of 2023, an Irish Nessie fan named Owen O'Fadigan spotted something on a webcam as well. He described seeing a large black hump that popped up, moved across the water, then dipped back under as a boat got close. Owen said fish do not have wakes. The movement was uncharacteristic of a seal or an otter. Only the Loch Ness Monster is the obvious choice. What you're looking at here is a sonar image taken at Loch Ness. On September 22nd, 2024, a skipper named Sean Sloggy was out on Loch Ness doing his usual rounds when something strange popped up on his sonar screen. Sean's been working these waters for years, but he's never seen anything quite like this. The strangeness of it was chilling. It's the sort of thing that leaves you speechless, he said. Sean was with maritime pilot Liam Mackenzie that day, just getting ready for another boat to arrive, when the sonar suddenly lit up. There was a massive object sitting about 320 feet down. Sean's used to spotting all kinds of weird fish and shapes on sonar, but this thing was massive. The shape looked long and stretched out, and Sean noticed there were what seemed like air pockets inside, something you wouldn't normally see with regular fish or logs even. They tried to circle back and find it again, but whatever it was had completely disappeared. We're not sonar experts, but I've never seen anything like it, Sean went on to say. In October of 2015, a man named Dave Black was driving near a golf course in Little Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, when he saw something that looked like a deer or maybe a llama walking along, but then it suddenly sprouted wings and flew off into the trees. Dave managed to snap a quick blurry photo on his phone though, and sure enough, there was this dark creature with big wings and what looked like hooves dangling beneath it. Dave had no idea what he was looking at. And when news of the photo came out, he stuck to his story, insisting that he was not trying to mess with anyone, that he really saw it and had no explanation. The photo blew up online and got everyone in New Jersey talking about the Jersey Devil again, a legendary winged creature that's supposedly haunted the Pine Barrens since the 1700s. Back in November of 2007, a Fresno homeowner known only as Jose to the media got spooked by his dogs barking at night, and he checked his security camera footage. He couldn't believe what he was looking at. The video shows this tall, skinny white figure gliding across his lawn, almost like living pants. There's no arms or torso, it's just long legs carrying a rounded quote-unquote head on top. Jose was pretty freaked. He woke his brother, saved the clip by pointing a camcorder at his monitor because the system would overwrite the footage. The story blew up after he shared it with Univision, and paranormal investigators also got involved. Even the History Channel covered it as part of fact or faked paranormal files and called it unexplainable. Then in 2011, similar footage was captured at Yosemite National Park showing two of these things together. one smaller, one larger. No one's ever figured out what they were. They're simply known as Fresno nightcrawlers. In February of 2012, farmer Pyotr Cherov, I don't know if I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but I couldn't find a video of anyone pronouncing it online. Well, anyway, he's an elderly farmer. He set up a camera by a river feeding Lake Lagerflot in East Iceland. He ended up with some pretty crazy footage that's gone on to become the best possible video evidence of the mythical Icelandic lake monster known as the Langerflot worm. The video shows what looks like a serpentine creature drifting just under the icy water, maybe 30 to 90 feet long. The clip went viral around the world, even prompting a local panel to vote 7-6 that it was real and awarded him with a small cash prize. The Langerflot worm's been part of Icelandic folklore since the 14th century. Said to be this massive lake monster, sometimes said to be longer than a football field. In August of 2023, photographer Shay Kelly dropped a set of images she'd been holding on to since 2018. She and her husband had been having lunch at an inn on Loch Ness when she caught something gliding through the water about 200 meters offshore. Shay said it was moving, quote, right to left at a steady speed, spinning and rolling at times. We never saw a head or neck. After a couple minutes, it just disappeared and we never saw it again, end quote. At first she thought it might be otters or a seal, but it never came up for air again and it just kept moving like a serpent, she continued. Steve Feltham, a well-known Nessie hunter who's been at this for over 30 years, called the photos the most exciting surface shots in decades, saying they are the most compelling surface images of the phenomenon. They still defy explanation. The images show two rounded humps rolling through the water. There's no obvious head or neck, but it definitely doesn't look like otters or divers. Whatever this really was, a Nessie or a massive eel, these are definitely some of the clearest and most intriguing Nessie photos possibly ever. In mid-2023, farmers near Oruro, Bolivia started spotting something weird roaming their fields. One drone video caught this hunched, dark figure standing upright in a crop field. Carlos Flores, who first spotted it in the footage, said, "It is strange. It looks like a dog, but it has a hump further back. Looking at the images, it has the same position as the chupacabra." Well, this creepy drone footage seemed to trigger fears that the legendary goat sucker had struck again, and a lot of that had to do with the timing of this. Farmers in the area had been finding dead livestock drained of their BLOOD. Some of them took to installing floodlights around their ranches, hoping to either scare it off or actually catch it on camera. The footage itself is not super clear. I mean, it's taken from very far away, but you can definitely see this dark hunched shape in the center of the frame, motionless at first, then shifting, almost like it realizes the drone is watching and scurries away. Imagine strolling on a Long Island beach and finding this thing washed up on the shore. Well, in July of 2008, a woman named Jenna Hewitt and two friends were walking along Ditch Plains Beach in Montauk when they came across this bloated, hairless corpse with a weird beak-like snout and long limbs. Jenna's friend Christina snapped the infamous photo, and the image blew up online within days. People couldn't figure out what it was. Some thought it was some kind of deformed raccoon, maybe a sea turtle without its shell, and of course, some people immediately jumped to secret government experiments. That's because this was pretty close to the old Plum Island Animal Disease Center. Some people were saying that maybe it escaped from some shady lab over there. No one ever officially confirmed what it was. To this day, people still argue about whether it was just a decomposed raccoon or maybe something else. Apparently, this next piece of footage was taken somewhere in Bolivia on April 20th of 2020. The video starts off pretty normal. You see a nice view of the trees, you hear birds in the background, but then you notice it. There's something hovering in the sky. It's not a bird, there's no flapping of wings, plus it's way too big to be a bird anyway. It's certainly not a plane. The object seems to just drift downward, slowly making its way toward the trees before finally vanishing into the tree line. Now, what could it be? A drone? Well, the object is far away, but still pretty easy to make out. This would have to be a pretty sizable drone, right? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments. A two-headed brown trout was found in a creek in southern Idaho, and it wasn't the only deformed fish in the area. Scientists found more trout with facial deformities, twisted fins, and defective eggs, and it all pointed to one thing: selenium pollution. Selenium is a metal that shows up naturally in the environment, but when it builds up from things like mining or coal burning, it becomes toxic. In this case, the pollution was traced back to operations run by J.R. Simplot, a massive agribusiness company that processes food and chemicals. They funded a study to look into the deformities, and while the report claimed that the selenium levels were safe, others strongly disagreed. Joseph Scorpa, a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, said the study was biased and, quote, highly questionable. He pointed out that it completely skipped over the effects on birds and reptiles and seriously downplayed the deformity rates in fish. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, politicians started pushing bills to deregulate selenium altogether. See, the coal industry has a stake in this too. What's happening in one Idaho creek is just one part of a much bigger picture. There's this fish called the Clear Lake hitch that only lives in Clear Lake, California, and some of them have developed a mutation known as pug-headedness, which you can probably form a pretty clear image of in your head. They end up with steep, almost boxy foreheads, bulging eyes, and an underdeveloped upper jaw. Basically, the top half of the mouth doesn't grow right, so it ends up shorter than the bottom, making the whole face look warped. Scientists think this is thanks to pollution, mainly from pesticides and mercury that have built up in the lake over time. The hitch used to be everywhere in this area. They were a big part of the diet for indigenous tribes like the Pomo, and back in the day you could see massive runs every spring. These days, even in a good year, only a few thousand show up to spawn. Some years, barely any. Out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, there's this tiny, deep pool called Devil's Hole. It looks like just a weird blue hole in the ground surrounded by dry rocks, but it's actually a deep water-filled crack in the earth, kind of like a natural well. And inside this tiny pool lives one of the rarest fish in the world, the Devil's Hole pupfish. These fish are tiny, smaller than your pinky finger, and they've been living here for thousands of years. The water is warm, nearly 90 degrees, and has very little oxygen. The fish need that exact setup to survive. It's a very specific environment, but they've adapted perfectly. Until recently. Right now, there are only about 75 of these fish left, and scientists are worried. Their genes are a mess. Scientists have found what's called genetic load. Basically, these fish are drowning in bad DNA, and there's no way for natural selection to clean it out. This leads to what's called an extinction vortex, where the genetic problems make it even harder to survive. Back in the 70s, conservationists built backup tanks to protect the pupfish in case the wild ones died out. But at one of these tanks, some pupfish from a nearby but different species snuck in. Their babies mixed with the DNA and grew way faster and healthier, even sprouting extra fins. The hybrids exploded in number, which showed biologist Andy Martin that introducing new genes was probably the solution here. Martin thinks the Devil's Hole pupfish could be saved if they bring in a few of these cousins from a spring just a few miles away. But some conservationists hate this idea. To them, it's not really saving this specific species of fish if you're changing their DNA. Nanosilver. That sounds like an anime attack, but this is a real particle causing mutations in fish. Silver nanoparticles, tiny particles smaller than viruses, are used in over 200 consumer products because they kill bacteria on contact. Scientists are now worried these little particles might be messing with the environment and wildlife. When silver nanoparticles wash down drains, they end up in rivers and lakes. Darren Ferguson, a researcher at the University of Utah, tested these particles on zebrafish embryos in the lab and found some pretty scary mutations. Some of them became, quote, extremely distorted, almost making a number 9 or a comma instead of a linear fish, he said. The particles caused deformities in eyes, tails, and most disturbingly, their hearts. And here's something pretty scary. Zebrafish actually have organs kinda similar to ours, so this could hint at risks for people too. Scientists still don't know exactly what this means for us or the planet long term, but the Environmental Protection Agency said the same special properties that make nanoscale materials useful are also properties that may cause some nanoscale materials to pose potential risks. In California's Kesterson Reservoir, a big environmental problem popped up because of selenium pollution. Selenium is a naturally occurring element, but when it builds up too much, it becomes toxic. In Kesterson, the water got contaminated with high selenium levels, mainly from irrigation runoff. The fish there, especially embryos, started coming out with serious deformities. Some had messed up eyes or were just missing them completely. There were deformities in their fins, the brain. Scientists call this cluster of problems Kesterson syndrome. And it's not limited to fish because the birds eating them also suffered. Birds have been found with deformed beaks, legs, wings. In Oneida Lake, New York, walleye fish started appearing with tumors. This comes from exposure to chlorinated wastewater effluent. That's water discharged from treatment plants containing chlorine byproducts. So these chemicals don't break down easily and can build up in the lake. These tumors are obviously a sign that pollution in the lakes has carcinogenic effects, meaning it can cause cancer. Walleye are especially important too because they're popular for fishing, so this is worrying not only scientists, but fishermen and the communities who depend on the lake. Back in the 70s, a coal-fired power plant in North Carolina started dumping wastewater full of selenium into Bellows Lake. Over time, it completely wrecked the fish population. By the early 2000s, the number of fish species in the lake dropped from 24 down to just 6. Most of the fish couldn't reproduce anymore. One study found that 19 of the original 20 species couldn't produce any surviving offspring. Only smaller fish that ate plankton, like mosquito fish, managed to stick around. They weren't affected as badly by the selenium buildup. Eventually, the plant stopped dumping the waste into the lake in 1986. Levels of selenium in the water dropped way down, and they even restocked the lake with sport fish like bass and bluegill. But even 10 years later, the fish were still having trouble reproducing. That's because selenium sinks to the lake bed and slowly leaks back into the food chain, especially if storms stir up the sediment. To make things even worse, some illegally introduced Alabama bass in 2011. They started outcompeting the native bass, especially largemouth. Now state officials are trying to get rid of them by removing catch limits, but the damage is already being done. In the Great Lakes, especially Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan, scientists have seen lake trout hatching with strange deformities. They found fish with weird faces, swollen yolk sacs, which are the little sacs attached to fish embryos that hold the nutrients they need to grow, and they have bloated areas around the heart, symptoms known as blue sac disease. It's caused by exposure to dioxins and toxic chemicals that build up in the water over years from things like industrial waste and pesticides. These toxins settle in the sediment but work their way up the food chain. Fish at the top, like lake trout, get hit hardest because they eat smaller, contaminated fish. The damage mostly shows up in the embryos, so it's affecting reproduction more than anything else. Many of the baby fish just don't survive. These deformities were first spotted decades ago and are still showing up in areas where dioxin levels are high. Even though regulations have cut down on the amount of dioxins going into the lakes, the old contamination is still there. Now, we've talked about all the bad stuff going on with fish, but what about some interesting adaptations? Well, Atlantic tomcod in the Hudson River developed a mutation that lets them survive in waters full of toxins. For decades, the river was basically a chemical dumping ground. Chemicals that usually kill or will seriously harm fish, but scientists have noticed that tomcod have developed a genetic mutation that changed how they process pollutants. Normally, these chemicals get into a fish's cells and start causing damage, but this mutation messes with the pathway the pollutants usually use. Instead, the fish store the toxins in their fat, basically locking them away where they can't cause a whole lot of harm. This trait didn't show up everywhere. It's specific to tomcod that live in polluted water. The downside, though, is that these fish are now heavily specialized to survive in dirty, polluted water. If the environment changes again, even if it's for the better, they might not adapt fast enough. And they're still concerned about predators eating them and taking in those same toxins up the food chain, including people who eat the fish. Killfish are tiny, colorful fish found along the East Coast, often in places no other fish would want to be, like New Jersey's Newark Bay or Virginia's Elizabeth River, where there's a lot of toxic waste. These areas are loaded with dioxins and heavy metals, but somehow killfish are doing pretty well, all things considered. Turns out they've evolved an insane resistance, up to 8,000 times more than normal. Researchers collected hundreds of killfish from different polluted sites and sequenced their genomes. And what they found was that each population had developed similar mutations in the same genes that basically turned off the normal response to these toxins. This kind of resistance is only possible because killfish have super high genetic diversity. For other species that don't have that kind of variation, adapting like this isn't really an option. Again though, there's still food for birds and bigger fish, so there's still a lot of worry as to how all that stored up pollution could affect the rest of the food chain. Deep inside a decommissioned US nuclear weapons plant in the southeast, wild alligators are taking over. A BBC Earth episode reports from the front line, followed biologist Laura Kojima and her team as they captured alligators in the contaminated waterways and sediments. So every year they catch dozens of these gators to test for radiation and toxins. They tag them, scan their skin, tails, and internal organs, looking for leftover radioactive material. So far, most alligators seem clean, but since they're at the top of the food chain, they act like the quote, canaries in the coal mine for the swamp ecosystem. Basically, if radioactive waste starts spreading through the food chain, the gators will be the first to show it. Somehow though, these things have adapted to live in a human-made nuclear wasteland, living in a swamp that most people wouldn't dare enter. The Hanford site in Washington was at one time a secret plutonium factory for nuclear bombs. It's still one of the most radioactive places in the US, but it's also home to deer, turkeys, wild hogs, and rabbits that scientists have been studying. Researchers found rabbits foraging near contaminated soil with high levels of cesium-137, a dangerous radioactive isotope that sticks around for decades. The Department of Energy and wildlife biologists monitor these animals because they can carry radioactive particles outside the site. Rabbits eat plants growing in contaminated areas and then move around the site and sometimes beyond. Other animals can show traces of radiation too, but the rabbits consistently show the highest levels. So they're super valuable when it comes to understanding how far the contamination might spread. On March 1st, 1954, the Japanese tuna boat Lucky Dragon No. 5 was fishing near the Marshall Islands when the US Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll went off. 15 megatons, way bigger than they'd apparently expected. Crew members saw this massive flash, and then hours later, a white powdery substance started blanketing the ship. Well, they scooped it up with their bare hands. It filled their hair, their noses, their eyes, even got into their underwear. That dust carried fallout, cesium, strontium, and uranium. The crew got sick right away, with nausea, burns, red eyes, bleeding gums. One man, Chief Radioman Aikichi Kubayama, died in September that year from radiation sickness, making him the first person to die from a hydrogen bomb blast. Other crew members suffered severe symptoms and spent weeks in the hospital. They had to dump 2 tons of tuna once the ship returned to port. They were completely contaminated. The fallout had spread over 7,000 square miles of ocean as well. In some areas contaminated by radiation, eastern tree frogs have been found with completely black skin, a condition called melanism. Scientists think this dark color happens because these frogs produce extra melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color, possibly to protect themselves from harmful UV rays or radiation. Studies near nuclear sites show that these frogs living in radioactive zones developed this black skin over time, which is unusual, of course, compared to their normally green or brown cousins. The extra melanin might help absorb or block radiation and UV light, acting like a natural sunscreen. They're still trying to figure out exactly how this dark skin helps them and whether radiation caused genetic changes or triggered the melanin increase in some other way. Either way though, seeing entire populations of frogs turn black near nuclear contamination zones, That's pretty eerie. Back in the 1940s and 50s, the US dropped 43 nuclear bombs on Eniwak Atoll. Decades later, scientists noticed something pretty weird. Sea turtles had nuclear pollution in their shells. Turns out turtles pick up this radioactive material when they eat algae or swim through contaminated water. That radiation gets locked into layers of their shells. Scientists grabbed some turtle shells, even old museum samples, and found nuclear material buried in different layers. One sample collected in 1978 showed uranium in the shell 20 years after the tests had stopped. Off the coast of Greece, there was this story about a pale, mutated, misshapen dolphin. So this photo here was snapped by a man named Harvey Robertson, a Scottish tourist on a boat cruise. It does look pretty damn strange. I mean, if someone in a lab coat showed me this image and said it was a radioactive dolphin, I'd probably believe them. The image first surfaced on cryptid forums where fishermen and beachgoers came forward saying they'd seen it near the Ionian Sea areas, rumored to contain dumped cruise ship waste. Zoologist Dr. Darren Naish from the University of Southampton's National Oceanography Center thinks that if someone took a skin sample from this thing though, it would probably show a lot of polyvinyl chloride, basically plastic. So yeah, he doesn't really think this creature is real, but what do you think? After the 2011 meltdown at Fukushima, scientists and members of the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, have been testing fish in the plant's inner harbor, and they've come to some shocking results. Well, maybe not all that shocking considering what happened, but still interesting. In May 2022, they caught a black rockfish that was full of cesium-137, 180 times Japan's safe limit. Over a year-long period, they found 44 fish above the limit, caught inside or near the same port areas. These contaminated fish are almost all bottom dwellers that feed off the sediment where radioactive cesium has settled. The sediment was found to have over 100,000 becquerels per kilogram of radioactivity. To put that into perspective, Japan's safety limit for radioactive cesium in food is just 100 becquerels per kilogram. This stuff was literally 1,000 times over the safe limit, so way too dangerous for human exposure, obviously. TEPCO has installed nets to stop this radiated seafood from mixing with safer catch, but even then, a fish caught about 50 kilometers away in January of 2022 was still above the limit, so bottom line is, cleanup hasn't eliminated all radiation in the food chain. In the weeks leading up to the Chernobyl disaster in April of 1986, people in the area started reporting something strange. Sightings of a massive black bird-like creature near the power plant. Workers described it as huge, with a wingspan of over 20 feet, with glowing red eyes that pierced through the fog. Some said it would circle the plant. Some claimed it hovered over Pripyat itself, just watching. People who claimed to see the creature often reported being plagued by terrifying nightmares afterward, and there were stories about mysterious phone calls with no one on the other end, just heavy breathing. It would also come on around the same time people would report seeing the bird. Some believe the creature was a warning, an omen, something tied to the disaster that was about to take place. And after the explosion at Reactor 4, the sightings stopped. No one claimed to see the blackbird again. Now, here's something that is totally verified. Inside the ruins of Chernobyl nuclear power plant, scientists discovered something very unexpected, a black fungus that seems to grow toward radiation. This fungus, called Cladosporium sporosperum, I think I'm pronouncing that right, probably not though. Well, it seems to feed off the radiation. Researchers first noticed it because it was spreading on the walls of the reactor's damaged areas. What makes this fungus so weird is that it contains high levels of melanin. Again, that same pigment that gives human skin color. Melanin in this case seems to help the fungus absorb radiation and possibly convert it into chemical energy to grow. It's like the fungus is photosynthesizing, but instead of using sunlight, it's using radiation. When scientists studied it, they found that the fungus actually grew faster when it was exposed to gamma radiation. Not just resistant, it's thriving in an environment that's lethal to most life on Earth. And that's really cool, because now scientists are thinking this fungus could possibly be used for radiation shielding in the future, maybe on space missions. When the Chernobyl disaster happened in 1986, radioactive fallout spread across Europe, settling into forests, soil, and water. Decades later, wild boars, especially in Germany, are still testing dangerously radioactive. The main problem is that these boars love to dig up and eat underground mushrooms called deer truffles, which are really good at soaking up radioactive particles from the contaminated soil. Even after all this time, radiation levels on the surface have dropped as well, but mushrooms keep pulling all that radioactive material up from the ground, and since boars rely on them as a big part of their diet, the animals end up with high levels of it in their bodies. Some samples tested in Germany have shown levels of radioactivity far above safe limits for human consumption. It's such a big issue that hunters who kill these boars are required to have them tested before the meat can be eaten or sold. In a lot of cases, the meat is just discarded. And these radioactive boars have spread all across Europe, migrating and mixing with other populations. This is pretty nuts. Watch the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So a woman in Compton named Jessica Ortiz caught whatever this was on her doorbell camera. It was around 1 a.m. on June 5th when her Ring cam picked up something weird darting across her porch. It's only in frame for a second or two, but it really does look like a little alien dude. I was like, I'm going crazy. I'm literally going crazy. I'm losing my mind, Jessica said after watching it. She grabbed her son and had him check the footage as well, just to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Going on to say, he sat up on his bed and he played it like 3 times. When he was done on the 3rd one, he was like, "Mom, it's an alien, call the police." I was like, I'm not calling the police on an alien, it'd sound crazy, end quote. She called her neighbor though behind the house to ask if anyone had been outside, and no. To make things creepier, Ortiz said that there were loud banging sounds right after the thing ran by. Watch what was captured floating through this person's backyard. Now it definitely looks like smoke at first, but as it moves through the hammock, well, first of all, it completely flips it around, and as it floats across the screen, the vague, formless shape starts to form into what looks like a ghostly entity with its arms stretched out. And it doesn't fade away like smoke would, it comes back, moving in the opposite direction. Watch the top of the screen. So that is pretty weird. This is either some clever VFX work or something that can't be as easily explained. What do you all think? Share your thoughts down below. Next up, we have a new piece of Bigfoot footage for you. On May 24th, a crew from Colorado River Expedition had pulled over on the upper Colorado River for a lunch break when someone shouted, "Bear!" But they quickly realized this wasn't a bear. As lead guide Logan Kirk put it, someone yelled out that they saw a bear, so we started looking at it, and that's when we realized it was something else. It wasn't a bear. It was standing up there on the hillside. It was definitely bipedal, which really stood out to us, end quote. So, here we see this big hairy figure standing upright looking out through the trees, stands between 2 pines and just stares at the camera, then disappears back into the woods. Now, bears do stand on their hind legs sometimes, but not like this. I'm not going to speak to the validity of this being a Sasquatch or not, but it isn't a bear. Hoax or not a hoax, that's another question, but Kirk isn't done with this yet, saying we're going to go up to see if we can find any evidence of what was going on up there, whether that's footprints or something else. And another recent story out of Colorado, 2 friends hiking in the Rockies may have accidentally snapped a photo of something. A 20-foot tall gray figure clinging to the side of a mountain. Jesse Clausen and Camille Avarella were coming down Long's Peak last year on August 24th when they took a photo of the view, not realizing that there was something lurking in the background. "I was shocked to the bone when we were looking at the picture," Clausen said. "At the time, they didn't see anything unusual. We didn't take the picture because we saw that thing. We just took it because the mountain range was pretty," she continued. The hike started at 2 a.m. and the photo was taken around 9 a.m., right after they'd reached the summit. "We were in full adrenaline mode, so we weren't really paying attention," Clausen explained. Well, weeks later, while showing the photos to family on a big TV screen, Camille's dad spotted something odd. "What the hell? That thing is at least 20 foot or so," he said. And Camille was like, "Should we call the Rangers?" It could be a rock, Avarella admitted, but it has all the features of something that is human, Clausen added. But what do you all think? Share your thoughts in the comments. This image was captured by a Reddit user's security camera. WeirdSet2248 writes, "This is a Tapo camera out the back. The edge of it catches the neighbor's garden. I have chickens out back, which is a new addition. My mom wanted to see a pic of them to see if I could keep an eye on them over the camera, and she replied saying, 'What's up with your neighbor's face?' WTF is going on with his face, Skinwalker?" And yeah, there's clearly something off here. The mouth, especially. When I first looked at this post, the face reminded me of something. I just couldn't put my finger on it. But thankfully, a commenter beat me to it, saying it looks like the guy is wearing a Winnie the Pooh mask. Kinda looks like that live-action horror version of Winnie that came out a couple years ago. This piece of footage comes from a CCTV camera in Thailand. Security guards were stunned by this strange object floating through the air. Take a look at this. Now, a lot of people were quick to say this was just a drone, but others have different opinions, including the guards. At one point, the guy filming the footage captured on the CCTV says the word Penanggalan. Now, Penanggalan is this vampiric creature from Malaysian and Indonesian folklore. By day, she looks like a normal woman, but at night, her head detaches from her body and floats around with her guts still dangling underneath. She flies through the air looking for victims, usually pregnant women, and feeds on them using her long tongue and organs. To keep her body safe while she's out hunting, she hides it somewhere and soaks it in vinegar so that her guts don't swell up. People would hang thorns or broken glass around their homes to snag her when she tried to come in, and if you ever found her empty body while she was out, you could kill her by burning it or stuffing it with sharp objects so she couldn't return to it before sunrise. So yeah, pretty gruesome creature. Luckily though, no reports of people being mauled by a flying head at the time this security footage was taken. This video comes from Reddit user illdisciplined3142, whose motion capture camera caught something really strange in their neighbor's backyard. Take a look at this. So it's not on screen very long, but the figure does appear to have a bit of an odd shape. The Redditor wrote in the description, "The camera was placed towards the back end of the property. Directly in front of the camera is a massive 10,000 plus acre forest, meaning this creature would be walking towards the street from the forest at 2:39 a.m. with zero lights guiding it. The camera began to also pick up strange sounds after it was seen and continued to do so for about 30 seconds before ending. At this point of view, this creature would have to be 9+ feet tall, as the camera is placed about 10 feet up. This is entirely unedited footage. I have absolutely no idea what this could be, and the movement is strangely slow. Rewatching this footage brings me goosebumps of which I never felt before, since this was really close to my house as well. This is also an area that rarely has hunters, as it is a very protected forest. If anyone can attempt to identify what this truly is, it would save me a lot of thoughts. This is a pretty odd video. It comes from Reddit user SoggyGate9281, who asked, "What does everyone think this is? The alarms are being set off because it's picked up motion detection." And I really don't know what to make of it. Seems to me it's just this glowing stick moving across the screen. Then it moves out of frame, but keep your eyes on the walkway at the bottom of the screen. A shadow moves across the frame. So someone or something was definitely outside, but who or what and why? This clip comes from Reddit user 87 Lucas Oliveira, who wrote in the heading, "A video captured by a security camera recorded a humanoid-looking shadow / transparent apparition at the back of the property, moving from left to right, leaving the dogs of the residents very agitated. The recording took place on a farm in El Salvador on February 6th, 2025. So let's take a look at this. Now, it's hard to make out because the figure seems to be semi-translucent, but there's definitely something there. Notice how fast the thing moves too. It doesn't look like someone walking, it looks like something gliding, although, as the Redditor says, it does have a humanoid shape to it. And I love that there are dogs freaking out in this video. It just means it's not a case of a technical issue with the camera. I think this is a pretty strange video, but what do you all think? This Reddit user's grandparents captured something disturbing on their home security camera. Draw Representative 12 shared these images just the other day, along with a brief description. He said that a year or two ago, he was at Thanksgiving dinner, and his grandfather showed him these images on his living room camera. His grandparents don't live with anyone else. There's no little girl in the home, at least not that they know of. So who's walking through the living room here? And just what in the hell is this nightmare fuel standing in the doorway? Draw Representative 12 also said that his grandparents aren't tech savvy enough to hoax something like this. Seems to me there could be someone secretly squatting in the home. Either that or something else was captured on camera here. I'm really not sure which is worse. This next clip is one of those what the hell am I looking at moments. It was filmed in Santa Fe, New Mexico sometime last summer, but that's about all we know. I really don't know how to explain what this thing is. Doesn't appear to be fully human, but I mean, maybe it is, I don't know. Now, New Mexico is no stranger to strange sightings. It's got a long history of chupacabra reports, the goat-sucking cryptid that's said to drain livestock. Sightings of these creatures pop up all across the Southwest, into Mexico, and even parts of South America. So naturally, people are wondering if this thing caught on camera could be a chupacabra. Others think it looks like a skinwalker caught mid-transformation. Whatever it is though, I can say for sure that I don't like it, and if I were living out there in Santa Fe and saw something like this slinking around, I'd be rethinking my zip code real fast. But what do you think? Real cryptid, elaborate hoax? Let us know down below. This next clip comes from deep in the Amazon rainforest, and if you're one of those people who roll their eyes at the idea of 50-foot snakes, this might give you second thoughts. Now at first it looks like just another shot of something slithering through murky water, nothing too out of the ordinary, probably a big anaconda, right? But then the camera zooms out and you start to realize just how massive this thing really is. Some people say it could be a modern-day Titanoboa, a prehistoric snake that was said to grow over 40 feet long. Supposedly extinct for millions of years, but who really knows with a place like the Amazon? It's one of the most unexplored regions on Earth. If a monster-sized snake was going to survive anywhere without being found, this is definitely the place. Now sure, this could be a trick of the camera. Maybe the angle makes the snake look bigger than it is, but when you see something that looks like it came straight out of the Jurassic period, moving that smoothly through a real jungle river, it's hard not to wonder what else might be out there. Sometimes it feels like we've just barely scratched the surface. How would you like to see this thing creeping through your backyard? In this video shared by TikTok user Cryptalker, a weird pale creature is caught crawling through someone's backyard in the middle of the night. It's moving on all fours and it looks way too thin to be a normal person. Its limbs are long and kind of jerky, and there's something really off about how it moves. A lot of people instantly compared it to the Rake, the creepy internet legend that's been floating around since the early 2000s, and this thing definitely has a similar vibe. The creature in the video doesn't really do much, just crawling along, but man, does it give me the creeps. Looks like it shouldn't exist. Too thin and lanky to be a person, but unlike any animal I've ever seen. Back in 2012, a trail cam on Whiteman Hill in Wetzel County, West Virginia picked up something very strange. A woman named Kelly Morgan submitted photos from her brother's deer camera that seemed to show a pale ghost-like figure wandering through the woods at night. According to Morgan, there's an old local legend about a young bride who was killed on her wedding day and that her spirit is said to roam the woods. She said her aunt told her the story, but it's mostly passed around as hearsay. Still, digging into the area's ghost tales, Morgan found a disturbing version of the story. Around 1882, 3 men allegedly took a young girl to a remote spot near Whiteman Hill, and after tormenting her, they hanged her. There is a small cemetery nearby that some think might be connected as well. The idea of a ghost bride fits into a much bigger pattern in folklore. Susan Dahl, co-author of Haunted Tales from the Holler, hadn't heard this exact story, but she did note how common ghost bride tales are. saying they are so common you could call them a bona fide subcategory. This has become a pretty famous image, right up there with the infamous Nessie photograph. This is supposedly photographic evidence of a creature called Champ that lives in Lake Champlain. There have been over 300 reported sightings of the creature over the years, but in 1977, amateur photographer Sandra Manzi spotted something sticking its head out of the water and snapped the now famous photo. Some describe Champ or Champy as a snake-like creature. Others say it's like an aquatic dinosaur, something like a plesiosaur. Champ has become a full-on local celebrity though. In Port Henry, New York, they built a giant statue of it. There's even a Champ Day festival every year. Businesses in the area, car washes, diners, gift shops, slap Champ on their logos, and Vermont's minor league baseball team is literally called the Lake Monsters, with Champ as the mascot. It's a modern day mythical creature, and people keep watching the lake, hoping to be the next to spot it. This next video comes out of Puerto Rico, captured on a hotel security camera. Take a look at this. That was kinda nuts. Definitely not a gust of wind. Something very clearly tugged at her hair. We just can't see what it was. Now, this hotel was built over one that had burnt down in 1986, and it's become kinda infamous for its paranormal activity. Guests and staff will say they hear disembodied voices and footsteps or see weird shadows moving about, the usual ghostly flair. But this isn't just spooky, it's rude and incredibly annoying. Whoever this ghost is, they deserved to die in that fire if that's how they go around behaving. This next photo comes from Reddit user Dan_Cukes, who writes, "My brothers and I went hammock backpacking in Pennsylvania last weekend. I was going through photos from the trip and started editing this one for an Instagram post. It wasn't long until I realized there was this incredibly human-like apparition/figure behind the campfire smoke just watching us. We never saw anything the whole day and night we were there, and we were 5 miles or so deep in the woods with no one around. It was a mile or so away from a small overgrown trail, so we were confident we'd be left alone. We don't know what to think of this and are pretty shook up over it." This eerie image was posted online by Reddit user Druzy. Looking closely, you can see a pale face with its mouth wide open, peering out the bottom of the window. Now, on its own, the image isn't all that amazing, but if the story attached to it is to be believed, it definitely makes for a creepy post. Druzy wrote, "I took this picture sometime in 2013. We'd always experienced things in this apartment. Footsteps, doors closing, lights on and off, blinds always falling off the window, but we never actually saw anything. I was on my way to work one day when I noticed the blinds in my room pressed against the window as if someone was spreading them apart. I snapped a picture to show my mom later, like, hey, look, the blinds were weird, like someone was pressing against them. Never been able to explain the face in the window though. There was nobody home except for my dog." This is a photograph of a beastly animal that was burnt alive by this group of brave men, the Hodag. This story comes out of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, a small town in the north of the state. It all started back in the 1890s when a local timber cruiser named Eugene Shepard came out saying that he'd come across this terrifying creature in the woods. According to his description, it had, quote, "the head of a frog, the grinning face of a giant elephant, thick short legs set off by huge claws, the back of a dinosaur, and a long tail with spears at the end." Shepard claimed they had to use dynamite just to kill the beast. He'd even released a photo of the charred remains, calling it the, quote, "fiercest, strangest, most frightening monster ever to set razor-sharp claws on the earth." In 1896, Shepard said that he captured another Hodag alive with help from a few bear wrestlers and a chloroform-soaked pole. He showed the thing off at the Oneida County Fair and at his own home, where he'd rigged it to move using wires just to scare people for fun. Yeah, the whole thing was a hoax. Shepard was kind of known as the town prankster, and the fun ended when scientists from the Smithsonian said they were coming to investigate. At that point, Shepard finally admitted he'd made the whole thing up. But by then, the Hodag had already become a local legend. I just had to include this one. It was just too fun a story. So this farmer in India walked out onto his property to see this massive snake that had just finished swallowing one of his cows. Look at the giant bulge right in the middle of the snake's body. Instead of running away, the farmer actually grabbed a rope and lassoed the snake, just threw it right over the middle of his body like he was wrangling a steer. I don't know what kind of nerves that guy has, but if I were in his boots, I'd have quit farming on the spot. I would be halfway across the country before even thinking about coming back. The clip's been shared around a lot online, and people are still debating what kind of snake this was. Some say it might have been a green anaconda, which do get very big. Others think it was something even bigger though, maybe something not officially documented. Certainly looks like it to me, but thankfully I do not live in a country where there are massive poisonous snakes stalking the forests, so not too familiar. So this guy caught something really spooky on camera while motorbiking. TikToker Owens was riding through a forest trail as the sun was setting. He was pretty deep into the trail, which he said seemed to go on forever. And he comes to a fork in the path. Then he notices something strange. It's eerily quiet.
Holy crap, dude, this trail going on forever.
He sits there for a few moments, trying to decide which path to take, before he spots something poking out of the brush. Take a look at this. As soon as he sees the thing, he rightly zips back in the direction he came from, but not before struggling to get his bike started like he's stuck in a monster movie or one of those awful nightmares where you're being chased only to find that you've lost the ability to run. Pretty awful. A man named Jose in Fresno, California had a security camera outside his home, mainly to keep an eye on people messing with his front lawn. Well, one night his dog started barking like crazy, so he went to check the camera footage, and what he saw completely threw him. It was a thin, pale white figure with long legs gliding across the lawn. It had no arms, no real body, it was just the two long, tube-like legs and something small connecting them at the top. It didn't move like a person or an animal, mainly because it didn't look like a person or an animal. Jose was freaked out and immediately woke up his brother. According to Jose, his brother went outside and found weird little footprints in the dirt. But when investigators finally got there, it had rained and whatever physical evidence was there was now gone. This was the first ever footage of what's been referred to as the Fresno Nightcrawler, or crawlers, because some folks have seen multiple of them at once. In July of 2022, a home security camera in Moorhead, Kentucky picked up something really weird. Something that looked like a pale, almost human-shaped figure moving through someone's backyard late at night. The creature was thin, with long arms and legs, and no visible clothes or fur. It didn't run or walk like a person, it just kind of crept through the yard in this slow, eerie motion. The homeowner released the clip online, and it was shared around everywhere, even news sites. A lot of people said it looked like some kind of rake. Others say this one has a bit of an alien vibe to it. The video was picked up by local news, including the Tribune, which simply labeled it as a bizarre backyard sighting. Nobody came forward with any clear explanation, and wildlife officials didn't release any statements about what it could have been. Internet theories went all over the place with this one, from a deformed deer walking upright, which is a bit of a stretch, to a sick person wandering around naked. That's much more plausible. Or maybe something straight out of The Descent. In October of 2023, two passengers were riding the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad, a scenic train that runs through the Colorado wilderness, when one of them spotted something strange walking along a hillside. They pulled out their phone and started recording. What they caught was this figure walking upright across the slope. It wasn't a person in hiking gear. It was tall, bulky, covered in what looked like brown fur, turning at one point to look back toward the train. Some commenters pointed out that the remote location made this very unlikely that anyone would be out there pulling a prank. Others just said, well, it kind of just does look like a costume. But the video made national news and reopened the Bigfoot debate once again. A lot of folks also pointed out how well this thing moved on such steep terrain. For believers, this is one of the better modern Bigfoot sightings. Clear daylight, open view, but like always, what do you all think? In 2019, near Sioux Lookout in Ontario, Canada, Gino Mikas, an experienced hunter, was with his wife and grandson grouse hunting when they heard this eerie howl coming from deep in the trees. Take a listen to this. Now, thinking it might be a moose, Mika started recording with his phone, but as the howls continued, and they do go on throughout the entire clip, it growing louder and more aggressive, it was very clear that this wasn't anything he'd heard before. Now, keep this in mind, guys. He's been hunting all his life, and he said the sound didn't match anything native to the area. Could this be a legit recording of Bigfoot? Two friends were hiking in British Columbia when they captured something they couldn't quite explain. They spotted this figure walking upright across a snowy ridge. It's distant, but the people behind the camera say they had a much clearer view in person, and what they saw didn't make any sense. See, the terrain was tough. Deep snow, steep drop-offs, no obvious trail, but the figure was moving so smoothly and quickly, without snowshoes, without a backpack, and seemingly wearing all one color. Now, anyone who has ever tried to walk through that kind of snow knows that it's nearly impossible without gear. They said the thing was bipedal, fast, and didn't look like a bear. They admitted the most logical explanation might be it was just some lone, seriously hardcore hiker, but what if that wasn't the case? The closest route down the mountain was a 300-meter sheer drop, and they didn't have climbing gear to follow it. So whether it was a Sasquatch, a fearless snow hiker, or something else, it left them unsettled enough to post online, and a number of people have commented about how much distance this thing manages to cover on such harsh terrain in such a short span of time. Known locally as the Lagerflot worm, this creature is Iceland's answer to the Loch Ness Monster. Said to live in the icy depths of Lake Lagerflot, the beast is described as massive, up to 40 feet long, and not sleek like your typical idea of a sea serpent. Instead, it's said to have a series of large, visible humps. Reports of the creature go all the way back to 1345, and sightings have trickled in over the centuries. In 1963, the head of Iceland's National Forest Service claimed that he saw it with his own eyes. In 1998, a teacher and a group of students said they saw it as well. The most interesting incident might have happened in 1983 when a group of workers were laying a telephone cable near the eastern shore of the lake, and during their depth measurements, they detected this massive moving object deep beneath the surface. When they later retrieved the cable, it was snapped, and right at the spot where it had rested on whatever that thing was. Then in 2012, the story blew up again when a 67-year-old farmer recorded this video of something snake-like twisting and swimming in a river which flows directly into the lake. Next up is this clip here, the Harley Hoffman Bigfoot footage. I remember seeing this clip years ago. It was edited into an interview with Hoffman himself, who's a well-known Bigfoot enthusiast. Now, for a while I couldn't find the footage again, but recently it did pop back up. This is actual footage he claims to have shot, and honestly, it is pretty solid. You get a decent look at the creature. It doesn't come across like some dude stumbling around in a Party City gorilla suit. There's what looks like actual muscle definition under the fur, kind of like what you see in the famous Patterson-Gimlin footage. Now, yeah, the camera is a little shaky, but I mean, come on, if you suddenly ran into this thing in the woods, are you really gonna whip out this perfect, smooth, Kubrick-style tracking shot? I doubt it. The shakiness actually makes it feel more real, like something someone would capture in the middle of a, legit what the hell am I looking at moment. Now let's talk about the 1992 Grassman sighting. Grassman is the name Ohio locals have given to this big ape-like creature that's supposedly been spotted all over the state. This particular video was taken in eastern Ohio by a guy named Don Keating, who managed to capture what looked like a large hairy figure walking into the forest. The footage is, of course, super grainy, and he's pretty far away, so no, it's not crystal clear or anything, but there's definitely something moving through the trees. It's not the strongest video evidence out there. It's hard to tell exactly what you're looking at, but this video was passed around a lot back then, and there was a ton of debate surrounding it. That always makes things interesting. Plus, I just have a fondness for old VHS footage like this. It's just got this creepy, it adds something to it, I don't know. Now, what's interesting is that Keating said he was a skeptic before shooting this, but after the encounter, he changed his tune. And finally, we've got the Salt Fork Creature, another supposed clip of the Ohio Grassman. This video was uploaded to the YouTube channel We Do It Outdoors, and even though it's only about 10 minutes long, it is packed with material. So two guys were exploring Salt Fork State Park, also in eastern Ohio, when they started hearing weird noises, and that's when they caught footage of something big and hairy moving around in the trees. They follow this thing for a while and get some pretty cool footage, more than you usually get with videos like this. Now, if this is a costume, it's a pretty good one. The creature looks bulky. It's not like one of those flimsy, off-the-shelf gorilla suits, and what really makes this one stand out is that the footage is clear. There's no camera shaking, or very little. There's no ridiculous filter to make it harder to see what's going on. You even hear some strange vocalizations in the background, which just adds to the whole thing. Whether it's real or not, this one is definitely worth a watch.
This creature doesn't just live a long time, it's biologically immortal. Often called the immortal jellyfish, these guys can literally reverse their aging process. When faced with stress, starvation, or physical damage, it reverts back to its polyp stage and begins life over again. A talent I'm sure we all wish that we had. It's the only known creature on Earth with this ability. It's tiny, only about 4.5 millimeters, but its godlike ability to defy death has made scientists rethink what's possible in biology. Some researchers studying it believe it could help unlock secrets to anti-aging in humans. Others, they can't help but compare it to ancient mythologies of eternal gods like Kronos, the Greek personification of time itself. Imagine a monster from the darkest abyss with fang-like teeth and glowing red lights. That is the deep-sea dragonfish, one of the ocean's most nightmarish predators. But here's what makes it extra strange. It produces red bioluminescence, which is nearly invisible to most deep-sea animals. It's like it has a private laser pointer no one else can see. Found over 2,000 meters below the surface, this fish essentially becomes invisible while it hunts. Some scientists believe this could be a form of biological cloaking, something unheard of in any land animal. Ancient mythologies often speak of sea gods who could disappear into darkness or create light in the deep, traits eerily mirrored by this creature's natural biology. It was once thought to be a sailor's legend until it was caught on camera. The giant squid can grow up to 43 feet long and has eyes the size of basketballs. For centuries, fishermen told stories of tentacled beasts pulling ships into the sea. People laughed, but then, in 2012, a Japanese team finally filmed one alive in its natural habitat. Its eerie, almost otherworldly movements stunned viewers around the world. Marine biologists confirmed this species has the ability to strike prey using long tentacles from meters away, and its feeding mechanism is almost alien-like in design. With its elusive nature and colossal size, it is definitely easy to see why ancient people believed creatures like this were gods of the sea, able to destroy on a whim and vanish into the deep. Would you survive in water hotter than boiling? No, of course not, but this thing does. The Pompeii worm lives near hydrothermal vents deep in the Pacific Ocean, where temperatures reach over 176 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius. Its back is coated with a symbiotic layer of bacteria that insulates it like armor, and may be the reason it survives such extreme conditions. Scientists discovered it in the 1980s and were baffled. Its existence defied what was thought possible for life. But what's stranger is that in ancient Sumerian and Greek texts, they spoke of gods born from fire and water, a union that perfectly describes the Pompeii worm's environment. It's not just surviving in hell, it thrives in it. This fish has a completely see-through skull. And inside, two giant green eyes that stare upward through its own head. Meet the barrel eye fish. Discovered in the 1930s but only fully photographed in 2004, this 6-inch long creature lives at around 2,500 feet deep. Its fluid-filled, transparent dome allows it to track prey by looking straight through its own skull. It does not look real, but it is. Some marine biologists have compared its bizarre anatomy to depictions of watchers in myth, beings who see all, move between worlds, and are said to monitor humanity from above or below. Yes, it lives in fresh water, but its closest relatives dwell deep in dark underwater cave systems, and what it can do is nothing short of divine. The axolotl can regenerate entire limbs, parts of its heart, and even its own brain. Researchers have amputated limbs, sliced spinal cords, and damaged eye tissue only to watch it all grow back perfectly. While axolotls are most commonly found in lakes like Xochimilco in Mexico, some of the cave-dwelling relatives in the same genus, like the olm or certain deep salamanders, thrive in pitch-black underwater cave systems and show similar godlike healing powers. In Aztec mythology, the god Solotl transformed into an axolotl to avoid death. It's hard not to see why the ancient people saw this creature as sacred. Imagine a creature swimming through Arctic waters that may have seen the 1400s. That is the Greenland shark. One specimen was carbon dated and estimated to be around 392 years old. Another might have been over 500. These sharks don't reach sexual maturity until around 150 years of age. They live deep in cold, dark waters and barely move, cruising through the sea with a slow, almost ghost-like motion. Their flesh is toxic to humans unless specially treated. In Inuit legend, these sharks are said to be guides of the underworld, silent watchers that drift through time itself. And with lifespans potentially reaching half a millennium, that doesn't sound too far off. This thing looks like a demon straight out of mythology. The goblin shark is an ancient species, often called a living fossil, because it's been around for roughly 125 million years. It has a long, flattened snout and its jaws that shoot forward like a harpoon to grab prey. When it opens its mouth, its jaws launch several inches ahead of its face at lightning speed. It lives at depths of up to 4,300 feet and is rarely seen by humans, thank goodness. Most sightings happen when one accidentally gets caught in deep-sea trawls. Its nightmarish appearance and freakish ability have made it a symbol of deep-sea mystery. Some researchers believe its bizarre morphology hasn't changed in millions of years, almost like something that's perfect as it is, or was never meant to evolve. This predator doesn't just sting, it electrocutes. The electric ray uses specialized organs to generate electrical shocks strong enough to stun or kill its prey. Some species, like the torpedo ray, can produce up to 220 volts, enough to knock out a human. In ancient Roman times, these fish were used in medicine to treat headaches by literally shocking patients. Ancient texts describe them as living thunderbolts, creatures that wielded divine power. In mythology, gods like Zeus controlled lightning. In the sea, this fish might have been seen as a piece of that raw, uncontrollable energy, and it's still out there today, swimming in silence. One day, scientists at the National Marine Mammal Foundation in California noticed something strange. It sounded like a person was talking, but there was no one around. The sounds were coming from a beluga whale named Nock. He had learned to mimic human speech patterns so well that divers initially thought a person was shouting underwater. The whale was moving its nasal cavity in a way never seen before, essentially reshaping its voice to sound like us. In many cultures, whales are seen as messengers of the gods, carrying wisdom and knowledge through song. Nock wasn't just singing, he was trying to speak. It started with a scream and ended with missing divers. In 2003, a diving expedition off the coast of Port Royal, Jamaica, encountered something terrifying. 2 divers entered the water to explore a deep reef trench, but only one came back. The survivor claimed they were ambushed by a massive, shadowy figure with writhing arms and eyes, quote, the size of dinner plates. Though unconfirmed, experts believe this may have been a Caribbean specimen of the elusive giant squid. These creatures can grow up to 40 feet long, and while usually deep sea dwellers, warming waters may be pushing them closer to the surface. Aggression towards humans is rare, but not impossible. Divers have reported being pulled violently into underwater caves and never seen again. In the blue holes of the Bahamas, especially around Andros Island, locals whisper about a sea monster called the Lusca, described as half shark, half octopus, this creature is blamed for a number of disappearances near underwater cave systems. Some scientists believe the Lusca legend might be rooted in sightings of unusually large octopuses, possibly the giant octopus, a cryptid some believe to be real. Even National Geographic has covered unexplained injuries and suction scars on local marine life. Whether it's an undiscovered predator or just a terrifyingly aggressive octopus, something dangerous seems to dwell in those deep water pockets. Its barbed tail has been blamed for deaths dating back to the 1700s. Off the coast of Guadalupe, local fishermen have long feared a giant black stingray called the she-devil of the sea. According to oral tradition, this stingray is over 10 feet wide and uses its serrated tail to attack boats. In 1996, a tourist diving group encountered a ray estimated at over 14 feet across. One diver was slashed by its tail and suffered deep lacerations, though he survived. Marine biologists have noticed that Caribbean stingrays are often larger and more aggressive than their Pacific cousins. Whether it's a mutation or a relic species, many locals still refuse to swim near certain ocean coves. They say its eyes shine blacker than the abyss and it follows boats for miles. In the depths of the Cayman Trench, one of the deepest parts of the Caribbean Sea, submersibles have recorded footage of a terrifying, elongated eel-like creature with jet black eyes and a translucent body. First reported in 2012, this creature was spotted at over 20,000 feet below sea level, and it moved in ways that defied known eel locomotion. Eel locomotion is a phrase I never thought I would say. Researchers dubbed it Leviathanus, though it's yet to be classified. Its bioluminescence patterns were erratic and eerie, pulsing in red, not blue, which is unusual for deep-sea species. Some cryptozoologists speculate this could be a type of prehistoric gulper eel that never went extinct. Fishermen claim she sings before a storm and her song pulls you under. Near the Samana Peninsula in the Dominican Republic, there are long-standing tales of a mysterious sea woman with glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. Unlike your typical mermaid myth, this siren is considered malevolent. Locals say she appears just before hurricanes, and her eerie singing can be heard echoing through the coral reefs. In 2017, a deep-sea hydrophone caught strange audio recordings that included what some describe as unearthly whale song crossed with a woman's voice. No marine species has yet been matched to the sound. Superstition? Maybe, but the fact that locals take her so seriously suggests something unexplained is going on. In Puerto Rico's famous bioluminescent bays, especially Mosquito Bay, kayakers and swimmers have occasionally reported strange underwater encounters. One 2021 incident involved a young man who surfaced screaming with 2 small puncture wounds on his calf. The wounds didn't really bleed and reportedly glowed faintly for hours after. Some speculate this may be the work of a rarely seen species of deep-sea lamprey, possibly adapted to warmer, shallower waters. Though no lamprey has officially been documented in the Caribbean, bite patterns on captured fish seem to match. It's also been rumored that Navy divers in the 1980s refused to enter the bay after dark. No explanation was ever given. One second it looks like a reef shark, then it vanishes into the sand. Off the coast of Barbados, marine researchers were tagging sharks in 2019 when they encountered a bizarre specimen. It looked like a Caribbean reef shark until it folded its body flat and disappeared under the seabed. Local divers have called it the sand devil, and some say it's capable of camouflaging itself so perfectly that it becomes invisible. The best guess? A genetically divergent type of angel shark, which are extremely rare and usually found in the Pacific. If that's the case, this creature may have migrated or evolved independently. Either way, its aggressive stalking behavior has led several dive instructors to blacklist the area for beginner divers. It leaves behind trails of scorched seaweed and a burning smell underwater. Fishermen near Cuba's southern coast, especially around the Isle of Youth, have reported sightings of a massive snake-like creature that glows orange beneath the water. It's known locally as the burning serpent. In 2005, a research vessel actually recorded a heat signature on sonar matching the exact path described by local boaters. It left left behind disturbed seabeds and what looked like burned vegetation. Some marine biologists suggest this may be a rare thermal vent-dwelling eel species, possibly excreting heated mucus or using bioelectrical discharge. No one's gotten close enough to confirm. One diver who tried apparently disappeared without a trace. Its pincers are rumored to slice through steel, and it hunts at night. In the deep reefs of Turks and Caicos, deep-sea crab traps have been coming up mangled or completely destroyed. In 2018, an NOAA research team found claw marks embedded in their steel retrieval gear. They also recorded sonar images of a crustacean estimated to be over 4 feet wide. It's been nicknamed the Reaper crab, and locals believe it's responsible for missing divers and vanished underwater drones. Though no specimen has been captured, comparisons have been made to the Japanese spider crab, but with a much thicker exoskeleton and higher aggression. Whatever it is, it doesn't like to be watched. It floats just beneath the surface, completely invisible, until it stings. In 2020, swimmers near St. Thomas reported painful burning stings despite no visible jellyfish in the water. One biologist took a water sample and found nearly invisible tentacles belonging to an unidentified species. Later dubbed Spectra medusa, this jellyfish seems to reflect and bend light to become nearly undetectable. Worse, its venom is unusually potent, causing paralysis in small fish and excruciating nerve pain in humans. One theory is that this creature may be a mutated version of the box jellyfish pushed into the Caribbean waters by shifting ocean currents. It's now one of the main reasons tourists are warned not to swim at night in that region.